It's been an eventful week for the St. Louis Blues between their 2024 NHL Draft picks, a couple of trades, and some additions to the coaching staff. Alec and I are going to break down all of it and give our thoughts on this episode of Note News. All right, Alec, it's time to cry about the draft. Alec was so excited about the draft. He gets his hopes up every year. So do I. Let it out, man. How you feeling about the draft?
Well, not terrible. I'm gonna have to pick my words very carefully this episode. I think there's a lot of nuance that can be used in this discussion. And also, I want to say before we get started, apologies if there's any noise in the background. That would be my dogs. They are just going crazy today over I don't even know what, and I'm not sure I want to. But excited to break down the draft.
I think they're probably upset that the Blues didn't trade up to get that 12th overall pick. I think it's
That's
probably what it is.
absolutely. I mean, we did name one of our dogs Blue, so
All right, well, there
she,
you go.
yeah, she was on the phone with Armstrong and did not come back happy.
Just trying to get something done. So the 2024 NHL Draft has concluded. It was really cool. It was out in Las Vegas at the Sphere. So every time a player was picked, you saw their face all blown up huge all around the entire venue. It was really cool. The Blues had a lot of picks this year, and we're gonna get into all of it. But first of all, the big one, their round one pick, they picked it at 16th overall, and they drafted Adam Jiricek. He's someone that we broke down a fair bit on our draft preview episode a couple weeks ago. So we'll try to add some additional context related to how he'll be as like a Blues asset. But he's a right-handed defenseman. He's 6'2", 168 pounds, and he's 18 years old. He's from the Czech Republic and was playing in the Czech Extraliga before the draft. But he did have a sort of a season-ending knee injury late last year, and that sort of derailed his season and made it a lot more difficult to evaluate him as a prospect. I think the fact that he was still drafted 16th overall in the first round, like despite the injury, speaks to how well he was performing before. So, what do you think of Adam Jiricek? Are you warming up to him at all? Are you disappointed? What's your thoughts on the Blues' first pick of the draft?
Yeah, I think I'm very mixed about this. I'll start with the good. So Jiricek, his brother is in the Columbus Blue Jacket system, if I'm not mistaken, and was a top 5 pick. I want to say 4th overall, a couple years back. His name's David Jiricek. He was a very promising prospect. And so this is his younger brother, Adam, and potentially because of his brother, but also I think of his own credit. Adam Jiricek is someone that's been scouted throughout his amateur career for even before this draft year. Like this was kind of someone who was projected eventually when he was draft eligible to be a very, very high pick in his early hockey playing career. As his sort of draft class filled out around him, we realized that, oh, wait, there are guys like, Cole Eiserman at the time, Macklin Celebrini, obviously, went first overall, Evan Demidov, who just kind of came more out of nowhere. But Jiricek is someone that's been on the NHL's in the NHL's like scouting for a long time, which is a very good and promising thing. This isn't like some total out of nowhere guy that the Blues just picked because they think that they're smarter than the rest of the NHL, and that's very promising. He also is very very solid size for a defenseman, and especially at 18 years old. Who's to say he can't get a little bigger? I think I would like to see him put on a little bit of muscle, honestly, if he doesn't grow any taller. And he skates very well, as you said. That's probably the best toolkit in his game. His skating is really intentional and very powerful, especially on offense. His offense is really powered by his skating ability, and that's the exciting thing. Now, I did say on our draft preview that Jiricek is someone that I'm not as high on. I would have taken him more closer to 20 than 16. So I do have some issues with his game. I think his defense could use a lot of coaching. I think mostly that's because he was trying to get drafted, though, and wanted to produce at at a high offensive level just so that he could
Sure.
get drafted. So I don't think that necessarily means his profile is bad. It's just that there's more work to do. Additionally, he has suffered quite a few injuries this last year. I believe he injured one leg early in the season, came back, and then, yeah, tore his ACL completely, which actually, according to TSN on sports, there's a video of it, came against another Blues prospect,
Yeah.
Pikarczyk, which is
Yeah.
just crazy now that they're potentially future teammates. Hopefully, if all goes well. And an ACL tear is a really bad injury. In other sports, it's definitely been something that you're not sure if they can even recover back to the level that they were. I think in hockey that's a little bit less of a concern because skating is skating. It isn't so much of a high energy explosive moves like
Yeah.
rusher, like making a
Mhm.
aggressive play, or in baseball, like stealing a base, whatever. So I am worried about the injury, but only as I would be worried about any injury for any young guy.
Right.
Reason that he can't recover from it. And when he does recover, he won't be able to make it to the invitational that they do for the prospects this year. He said he's still healing, so it sounded like it was a pretty bad injury. But once he does recover, I think he could really shoot up the prospect rankings for the Blues. Last thing I'll say here is because he does have a lot of really good tools. This is a very high risk, high reward pick, I think, from the Blues. And given where the state of our prospect system, especially on the defensive end, is, I honestly don't hate the pick. It's given everything else that went around it, with the potential trade up or even some of the other options at that slot. It does feel a little bit not great. Would not have probably not have been my pick, but as I've said a couple times, there's a reason that I'm not an NHL GM. And if anything, Doug Armstrong, Alex Steen, and their whole team have really proven that they know how to scout and draft and develop, especially in the first round. I'm sorry, I'm rambling now.
You're
I'm
good.
sorry I couldn't quote it exactly, but I do remember I saw a tweet that was in Doug Armstrong's entire tenure, he has only had 2 first-round picks that didn't become successful NHL player, and one of those he traded away before they even got while they were still a prospect. So he's a very good track round in the first round, especially, and in the draft in general. And so I really think this could be a really promising high upside pick. It's just that there is a decent amount of risk attached with it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, he's got that offensive tool set, like you were saying. He's really good at moving the puck. Looking at like his elite prospects page, I think the thing they're most high on him about is his passing ability. He's really good at sort of reading the ice and then sending the puck through a lot of traffic, which makes him a real asset on the offensive, in the offensive zone. So excited to see what he can do there. Really hope he can, as you said, develop defensively. There is a little bit of work to be done there, but he is also really young, so that can be coached into him. It seems like he's got a decent hockey IQ, so I don't think that would be too difficult. But I don't know. It seems to me like there's a lot of potential there. It's just a question of whether or not he can stay healthy is the only thing, like you were saying.
Totally.
So really excited to see what he can do when he comes back from the injury. And then, yeah, like you said, I think Doug Armstrong and the Blues have earned a little bit of trust, a little bit of leeway. I know that a lot of Blues fans are unhappy with this one, but I don't know. I think they've earned our trust a little bit. I think we should just see how it pans out. I will say, before the draft, it's sounded like they weren't going to be drafting from an area of positional necessity. They really said we're going to take the best player available. I'm not sure that's what they did here. I think they did reach a little bit, not by much, just by a few picks for a defenseman. They obviously really recognize their need for a defenseman, as you were saying, and I think they sort of leaned a little bit out of that idea of take the best player available, because there were some forwards available at 16 that probably were a little better overall than Jiricek. So I understand the frustration that some people feel on that front. But when you look at the state of defense in the Blues system, they really needed some help, and I think Jiricek can help provide that. Before we move on to their other picks, do you want to talk about the potential that of trading up that they almost did? Yeah. So the 12th overall pick belonged to the Flyers, right? Philadelphia. Yep. And when they were on the clock, it looked like they were trading their pick. Just a question of who they were trading it to. Alec and I were freaking out. Blues, traded to the Blues. There was one of those top 6 defensemen left. It was Zeev Buium, who's like a really good two-way player. Shout out to Andrew. Really good two-way player. And we were really hoping they'd get it done. And from what it sounds like from the reports after the draft, the Blues tried. They really tried to get that 12th overall pick. I'm not sure what was on the table. I don't think we know what was on the table from the Blues. It probably would have had to been their 16th overall pick plus something else. It ended up going to the Wild, who were picking one pick after at 13. So it ended up going to Minnesota. I can't remember what they gave up. I think it was a second rounder.
It was the 13th overall pick, and then their 2025 third round.
Third round. Okay. So yes. And then they ended up drafting Buium. So that's where they could have gotten him. That would have been so cool. I know that would have made your night. He was your number 2 overall prospect, or overall defenseman. So a bummer that they couldn't get it done, but they tried. Mm-hmm. And I think that Jiricek was at the top of that next tier of defensemen, as we said on the last episode. So I'm not unhappy that they got him by any means. I think in round 1, if you had asked me before the draft if they can't have one of the top 6, I probably would have said probably like from a group of 4-ish players, Jiricek, Stian Solberg was another one that we broke down. Sort of those two made up the next tier of defensemen. And then other than that, I would have picked like some forwards like Konsta Helenius or Michael Brandzik-Nygaard, but those guys all went ahead of the Blues pick. So I'm fine with the Jiricek pick. I think the rest of their draft went well, so that sort of helps a little bit. But I understand there is some risk there with the injury. So people are understandably upset, but I do think, like we were saying, they've earned a little bit of trust with their drafting so far.
Yeah, I want to echo that a little bit of just like the optics around the 16th overall pick that the Blues made feel a lot worse than the situation probably is. Mm-hmm. So I'll talk about that, and then I'll explain why it is going to be okay. So some of the guys we're talking about that were still available that would have been really interesting to pick. The Islanders took Cole Eiserman at 20th. Yeah. He is just a goal scorer, and who knows, could develop into something more. I think with the Islanders, that's probably unlikely. But who knows what will happen with him. Michael Hage went with the next overall pick. He's a center I really liked. Just really strong skater, really high IQ, good two-way game. Then the pick following that, 22nd overall, the Predators selected Yegor Surin. Mm-hmm. He's a center who plays really physically, really heavy hitter, fast skater, strong, great on the forward and back check, which is a type of player that I like, a type of player that the Blues like. Yeah, we talked about Solberg. I promise I didn't intend for this, but they all went in a row. So this is the 23rd overall pick to the Ducks. Really good pick from the Ducks, and especially at that spot. I think that's around where Solberg should have gone, and that's where he did go. And we broke him down in the last episode, so listeners, you're probably familiar with him. So those were some of the forwards on the board that I would have been very happy with for one reason or another, especially because, as I think we'll get into in the next round, our center depth was also very much a position of need in our prospect pool. And so, yeah, the other part of it too is the trade up. So Minnesota gave up their pick, which was 3 picks ahead of ours and a future third, For us, it probably would have been our pick in a future second, which ended up
Mm-hmm.
going in a different trade, which is another interesting move. But we'll get to that later in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it feels so bad that it had to be Zeev. When it was happening and there was a trade up, I as I said, it was texting John. I was like, it's going to be Nashville. They're going to select Zeev. And of course, it was the other Central Division team that I cannot stand.
Yeah.
But so that really does feel bad. He is a left shot D, which we do have a lot of. But you get good players. Jiricek is a right shot D, so that does help our prospect pool. Also, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing. And I know in a quote Armstrong gave to Jeremy Rutherford, writer for the Atlantic. Armstrong
The
says something
Athletic.
along the line. Yes, thank you. The Athletic.
The other one.
Right. Armstrong said something along the lines of, it's more so that we were happy with where we were picking than it wasn't worth, the value of giving up. Is that GM speak? Is it truth? Probably a little bit of both. But yeah, so if we look at the remaining players so the fact that they didn't trade up, I think is a move that's probably going to hurt them in the future, if I had to guess, because Zeev is just such an offensive monster and solid enough defensively, and you could even coach that up into him. Jiricek kind of could have the ceiling of someone like Aziz Boyem. It's just he's a lot more of a project. And honestly, looking back on it, I think a lot of this does have to do with them bringing in Alex Steen.
Mm-hmm.
So Armstrong has mentioned how he wants to, show Steen the ropes, essentially. That's the main point of this assistant coach hire. But honestly, I think a lot of this is setting Steen's tenure up for success so that he can just hit the ground running and open a new championship window. And that's what a pick like Jiricek allows us to do, that, a pick like an Yzerman or a Hage or whatever, who are a lot more, maybe not Yzerman, but, a lot of the other forwards are a lot higher floor, lower ceiling guys. Yzerman is just kind of a total like dice roll, essentially. Really not the Blues MO, but anyways, enough on Cole Yzerman. So a lot of those other guys are very high floor players that you like in your system, but they don't really excite you. And I think we'll have to see how next season goes for Jiricek, especially down the stretch, as he's fully recovered from his injuries. But this could really be something that if he hits, and as we've said, the Blues have a very good track record for hitting on prospects, this could be something that really sets up Steen, because Jiricek will probably make the NHL close to the beginning of Steen's tenure, maybe a year or two into his tenure. And that could be a piece that he can really build around if this guy hits. So that's why I do think there's a lot to be excited about. Again, it's kind of a big question of if, which you maybe don't feel great about, but I am going to choose to trust our front office. And I do think this could end up being a very a move that's going to take a lot of time to say so, but could end up being very wise by the Blues.
Yeah, I'd agree. I am pretty sad they didn't trade up. I really wish they had. But real quick, we're touching a lot on Jiricek because he's the the big catch of the night for the Blues. Their first rounder. While he did not play this season, his previous season with in the Czech U20 league. Let's see, looking at his stats, he played 41 games, 12 goals, 17 assists, and 29 points. So pretty good. His plus minus was plus 10. So really good numbers there. He played far fewer games this year. It looks like 19 games, 1 assist. So
he was injured for a lot of it.
Yeah, so real tough to do much with so few games, but we'll see if he can stay healthy. There's potential. So
he has the tools. He has the potential. I think, this is someone that I'm going to be monitoring very closely for a long time. And it may not look good now, but check back in a year or two. And I know that's never fun to say, but if we're being honest, that's what you have to do with every first round prospect that isn't the first overall pick. And I think, over the next year or two, we'll see truly how good our draft and develop staff are.
Yeah. Moving on to round two, the Blues had 2 picks in round two at 48th overall and 56th overall. They tripled down on defense with these picks. At 48, they selected Colin Ralph. He's from Minnesota. He plays for St. Cloud State University, I believe. Left hand, a left shot defenseman, 6'4", 209 pounds, real big guy at only 18 years old. And then Lucas Fisher was picked at 56th overall, also a left shot D, 6'3", 181, only 17 years old. He's one of the youngest guys in the draft, if not the youngest, I think. He's from Michigan. He currently plays in the OHL for the Sarnia Sting. Decent numbers for him last season. In 68 games, had 34 points. So not bad at all. He's looks to be someone with like a really mobile style, really physical. He's got like a wide reach, good at like poke checks and things like that. Good skater. And then for Ralph, the previous pick at 48th, he's sort of also physical, really more aggressive, really uses that size that he has. Also a good skater and like just really good on defense, it seems like. So I know you're a lot more sort of plugged in and clued in to like these prospect details, but what do you think of the Blues' second round with both of these left shot defensemen?
Yeah, this is something that I'm going to be saying a lot this episode, so listeners, I'm sorry. But there is a lot to like with these picks. So Colin Ralph actually is a Kirkwood alum, played for Kirkwood hockey for all of our, I expect most of you St. Louis listeners.
Shout out. I didn't know that.
And
My dad went to Kirkwood.
yeah, well, Ralph's,
there you go.
I guess you can't say alma mater, but you get the point. Yes, and committed to St. Cloud State for next season. Really big size. I mean, his stats do kind of jump off the page. Last year in one of the prep leagues, he had 66 points in 57 games, ton of assists. So very much you'd expect a puck moving defenseman, someone who's got a really good eye for passing, and very, very good defensively too. So with his defensive ability and what we've seen him be able to produce offensively, I think this could be a real hit. And in the second round, I'm very impressed the Blues are able to find this guy. And not only that, but they also nabbed Lucas Fisher, who's another defenseman that I really like. Very fast skater, I think, as you mentioned, and also got solid size. Also put up decent production for, again, a very good defensive profile. So a lot of very solid picks that if they can, just tune up essentially 1 point in their game as they grow both physically and mentally and through the game of hockey, these could be really solid. I'm not sure that they'll ever be like top pair guys unless something goes crazy through their development, but these could be really, really good second or third pair guys. If they get a little bit more of a shot or a little bit better at passing in for Fisher, or Ralph gets maybe a little bit more, or just continues his aggressive play style and like makes it more consistent. But yeah, I think there's a lot to like with him. And I think Colin Ralph is honestly one of my favorite picks that the Blues made all draft. I'm not just saying that because he's a St. Louis boy, but I really do think that there's a lot of tools, a lot of upside here. And I think that's a theme. There's two themes that perhaps you can figure them out as we're following along, that the Blues clearly drafted with this year. But these are really high upside picks that, again, I think is just Armstrong trying to do what he can to make Steen's tenure really successful.
Yeah, totally. One last thing on Ralph, since I broke down Fisher's stats last year, it seems like he just gets a ton of assists. Really good at assisting. So in his 18 and up prep league last season, in 57 games, he had 58 assists, so more than an assist per game, just barely, but
that's crazy.
More than an assist per game. Yeah, and it seems like it's a trend with him. Let's see. In the previous season with the same team, he had 33 assists in 54 games. So he's just really good at setting teammates up, and really excited, as you said, just to see where these guys end up. Probably not a top line defenseman, but really solid solid guys, it seems like. Moving on to round 3 as we start to move this along. A lot less details available on some of these later players, but we'll break them down as much as we can. The Blues had 2 more picks in round 3 at 81st overall, where they drafted Andre Koss, I think is how we're going to, or Kosh, Andre Koss. He's a left winger, 6'2", 176 pounds, and 18 years old. He's from the Czech Republic. Seems like a good passer and a good skater. Has sort of like an explosive style of play. And then at 95th overall, also in the 3rd round, they drafted Adam Jiricek. He's a center, 6'5", 201 pounds, so a bigger guy. Also 18, also from the Czech Republic, and he plays in the WHL with the Edmonton Oil Kings. He seems like a power forward, really good at moving the puck. This is the only round, I believe, just looking, the only round that they drafted a player that wasn't a defenseman or a center. So Koss was that winger that they drafted. And then with Jiricek, you see them start to prioritize centers for the rest of the draft. So round 3, what do you like about Koss and Jiricek?
I think, if you have favorites, you got to have some that fall down the board. I think Koss is probably one of my picks I'm lower on, but I think it's a good dart throw, as I tweeted out. You can check it out. My handle's right there for video people, and you can find me online. Anyways, I mean, he plays really strong, a really strong forward game. He's got good size at 6'2". Listed as a 2-way forward. If I'm being honest, I haven't seen him play, and I hadn't really heard about him before. I think it's a good dart throw, and kind of that's all I can say about him. He'll have to prove me wrong through his development. Jiricek, though, is someone that I really like also. He's 6'5", and this, I guess, round 3, we picked 2 of our 3 Czechs of the draft. So, but I do really like Jiricek. I think he's got a very strong offensive toolkit, and especially for his size at 6'5", this could be a really special player, a really, really good role player. If he can get a little bit more physical and continue to develop his offensive game, I think this could be a key contributor for the Blues down the line.
For sure.
So really like Jiricek. Koss, we'll see. I don't dislike it at all. Dislike Koss at all. I just see less from him. But yeah, finally, some guys that can play center. I think maybe I don't know. It's hard to say. Jiricek will probably be a center. Koss probably not. And
Jiricek seems to have a more balanced profile. Like looking at his stats last year in the WHL, he played 54 games, 23 goals, and 24 assists. So seems to be a nice balanced player. So I think he was also, I would agree, he was one of the better picks in the draft. Anything else you wanted to add on those before we move on?
I don't think so. Just echoing, I really like Jiricek. Could be a really special player.
Yeah, totally agree there. So we'll cover round 4 and 5 next. So in round 4, the Blues picked 113th overall. They drafted Thomas Mercick. He's a center from Canada. He's 6 foot, 170 pounds, 18 years old. He plays for the Medicine Hat Tigers in WHL as well. Powerful skater, seems like a fast player, and seems like he has a good shot as well. And then in the 5th round, with the 145th overall pick, they drafted William McIsaac, also a Canadian. He's a right shot defenseman, 6'3", 192 pounds, 18 years old as well. And also in the WHL, so 3 straight WHL picks. He plays for the Spokane Chiefs. Seems like a really physical defenseman, and sort of a defense-first defenseman. So maybe not a ton of offensive value with McIsaac, but some solid defense there. What do you think of Mercick and McIsaac?
I think Mercick might be my favorite pick in this entire draft.
Ooh, saucy.
Really, relative to like positional value and everything, I'm excited about what Jiricek could be, but I really, really like Marsick. He is ranked. We picked him at 113. Yeah, at 113 in the 4th round. And this is a guy who is ranked as high as 46th overall. So I'm, as I said, I'm really excited about him and his profile. Someone that I had heard about is like a draft sleeper, even in like, middle towards the back of the 2nd round. So the fact that we got him in the 4th is awesome to me.
Yeah.
He's like a power sniper. Like he hits hard, he plays
Okay.
hard. He's okay defensively, and he has got a rocket of a shot. Um,
Ooh.
so good, like good goal scoring ability, and solid offensive toolkit. Could be a solid player. I think he'll end up being more of a winger than a center, if I'm being honest. But he could, as a winger, he could probably become a plus defender. As a center, probably not. But yeah, I really like this guy. He's 6 foot, and so we'll see what he becomes. Perhaps he bulks up and plays center. But I don't honestly mind him as a bit of a strong winger. So really
Yeah.
like that. And then McIsaac, I think just another like fine defensive like depth piece to add to our another dart throw, as it were. Um, I am not as in love with his game as some of these other prospects, if I'm being honest. He put up decent numbers, but excuse me, I could see that kind of falling off as he as he progresses through the systems, and as a defensive guy, if you're not putting up any type of points, it's hard to make it to the NHL.
Yeah.
Even as a defensive defenseman, you need some production.
Right.
But I think he's fine depth, and who knows, maybe he develops some crazy offensive stroke. And I think it's a fine pick.
Yeah. In the WHL last season, in 67 games, he did have 21 assists. So it's not nothing, but really seems like a defense first kind of player. But he's big, and I think that they could use that size for sure. Yeah, 6'3", 192 pounds, I believe, is where he measured in. So that's round 4 and 5. They didn't pick again until round 7, and they had 2 picks at 209th and 211th overall. So the 209th pick, it was Antoine Dorion, a center from Canada, 6'1", 190 pounds, 18 years old. Seems like a power forward type. I believe his dad is a former GM of the Ottawa Senators, if I am remembering that correctly. So he's been around hockey a while. It seems really passionate about hockey.
You're right.
Not much to say that late in the draft beyond that. But then at 211th overall, they picked Matvey Korotky, also a center, also 6'1", 198 pounds, and 18 years old. He's a Russian player. Seems like a good shooter. Seems like he moves well, and a power forward type. So those are their final picks of the draft in the 7th round. Anything to say on these two?
So I mentioned, I can't love all these guys. I don't love Koss, and I think Dorian is probably my least favorite pick that we made. I'm going to be honest, I don't really have anything to say about him. I don't think he's going to amount to anything really. I'm not sure he'll make it to the NHL. I wish him the best. I hope he does. I hope he becomes I don't know, the next Evgeny Malkin or whatever. But or Canadian Evgeny Malkin, whatever. Nathan McKinnon, whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I see that happening. And then Karaki is actually someone I'm very excited for, as excited as I can be for a 7th round pick. So he's a super offensive player, really good, I think, goal scoring and assist ability. His last season in the MHL, he scored 20 goals in 51 games, along with 18 assists for 38 points. And I think he's got good size. He's got a great shot. Again, I think as excited as I can be for a 7th round pick. The other thing which I've brought up multiple times on social media is that this is the return for the Islanders for trading like half, 2/3 of his season of Robert Bertuzzo for the Islanders, which when that happened, I was shocked that we could move him for anything. I cannot believe that the Islanders actually traded for this guy. Don't get me wrong. loved Bertuzzo when he was a Blue, but he was well past his aging curve, and Father Time is undefeated. So I was shocked that they could get anything for him, and the fact that we get like a promising 7th rounder for 2/3 of a season of Robert Bertuzzo, who probably I'll see if I can pull it up really quick, but I can't imagine his stats were phenomenal with the New York Islanders. So at a -3 and 1 point. Or sorry, that was in the playoffs. In the regular season, he had 0 points and a -2. So
there you go. Well, at least he improved.
The the fact that we got anything for that, this is just, it's stuff like this that I think Armstrong has really done a great job with it with the Blues throughout his tenure, that I think he doesn't get a lot of credit for. Because to be honest, like, I'm not surprised that most fans don't give him credit for 7th round picks, but it's little things like this that really give me hope for the Blues as an organization. And again, just could not be more of a fan of this pick as much as I can be.
You better be careful, Alec. I'm gonna have to get a holding Army's water thing for you, like they have over at Deal in the Cards. So that's the.
We could be even more obnoxious than it already is. Every other point.
Yeah. So that's the 2024 draft for the Blues. I think the final tally is 4 defensemen, if I am correct, 4 centers and 1 winger. So do you want to give a grade? What's your grade for the Blues draft this year?
Mm-hmm. So for those of you playing along at home, the themes I noted for this year's draft were a lot of high upside picks, maybe lower floor, but with guys like Mercic, with Karatki, with Jekko, and obviously Jiricek, maybe even like a Colin Ralph. These are very high upside guys who maybe don't have the highest floor, but if they hit, like, these could be real impact players, 3-4 years down the line. The other thing is big, in like big, bold text. They like big guys this time.
Yeah.
So sure. Just going through heights here. Jiricek 6'2", Colin Ralph 6'4", Lucas Fisher 6'3", Andre Koss 6'2", Jekko 6'5". Their shortest guy was Mercic at 6 foot flat. And then McIsaac 6'3", Dorian 6'1", and Karaki 6'1". So really large players. So here's where I'm going to have to use a lot of nuance, and please, listener at home, don't immediately run to the comments. I think, in my opinion, I would give this draft like a C grade, and I think that sounds really bad, but it's actually like a very good C. So
C+.
If you want it to be more of like sounding more positive, you could call it a B-. But like, if I think of what like a C means to me, it's like perfectly average, and you didn't do great, but you didn't mess it up. And that's kind of how I feel about this draft, is they didn't mess it up. I think this has the ability, with retrospect, to be a very good draft, as I've mentioned. A lot of upside here, but also this could be a draft that really only adds to our prospect depth and gets us 1 or 2 NHL players at the line. So if I'm being honest, I can't give it anything higher than a C. But like, again, I'm very excited about that because of the upside of these guys. And this was by no means, I don't think, a bad draft. It's just, given, as I said, the risk involved, and also I think a little bit of that is baked into not being able to trade up. The board was falling very favorably. There were still 3 top 6 defensemen with the 10th overall pick still available. And that's a range where a trade up was not only feasible, I wouldn't call it probable, but like would have been very doable. And Army did his due and got on the phone, but the fact is a deal didn't get made. And if we had come out of this draft with a Salayev or a Dickinson or a Ziv Boyum, this would have been probably like an A- draft, or something I would have been very excited for. And I think the fact that it was so close, but just it didn't end up happening. To me, it's, again, I can't call it a bad draft. I don't think
Yeah.
it's a bad draft, but there was a lot of meat left on the bone, as it were,
Hmm.
or beef left on the stem for any, my co-host. Um, but yeah, so it's a C grade for me. Um, sorry about that.
Sorry, no, that was hilarious.
It's a C grade for me, but it's something that I'm still excited about, and I think it really turned out to be uh, a good draft in time. It's just, we'll have to see. It's gonna need time to sort of
Yeah,
bake.
that got me. Sorry. Yeah, no, I would agree. I think I'm gonna lean like B minus for the fact that they clearly had a plan going into it and clearly executed
Absolutely,
it. So like,
absolutely.
you know, we talked a little bit on our previous episode about how much they needed defense and then how much they needed more center depth, and I think they got that done. Like, I think that, as you said, the benefit of hindsight a couple of years down the road will like let us obviously like more clearly evaluate how they performed this draft. It's tough to say like, one day after it's over, but I'm gonna lean a little bit more positive, B minus, just because it was clear that they like knew they had a plan basically. There were
Yeah,
some teams that it just seemed like Philly, for example. They were just like, yeah, I don't know, we don't really like anyone at 12. Who wants our pick? Um,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, there's more nuance to it, but I
No,
think that
absolutely.
they were very like well, planned out sort of in what they wanted to get done, and I think they for the most part got it done with the picks that they had. Again, to get like one of those like a B plus or an A grade, it definitely would have like required a trade up to get one of those top 60 men. But um, real
And yeah,
quick,
I want to echo,
yeah,
like, I think it's a really good point that they had a plan clearly and they executed it clearly.
yeah,
And all of this is me holding Army's water. All of this is, as I've said in previous episodes, stuff that just like reeks of a really good, well-run organization. If you like have a plan and you execute it, teams like Ottawa, like Buffalo, like Philly, very much don't appear that way. And I mean, look at their recent, or therefore lack of, success both in the regular season and in the playoffs. Buffalo and Ottawa have two of the longest playoff droughts going, and Philly is kind of also going nowhere.
hmm,
So I think this is just another sign, if at worst, that maybe we don't get anyone good from this draft. That Blues fans should be happy with where the Blues are as an organization, and I think that's a really good thing to say as we're going through this retool period.
yeah. I think it's a good time to be a Blues fan. There's a lot to be hopeful for and happy about on the horizon with a lot of our young players. We got to move it along here, but before we start to talk about some of the other Blues news, do you want to give sort of a quick draft recap of some of like the Blues rivals and opponents, mostly sort of in the Central?
Yeah, I'll go quick on this because we spent a lot of time on the Blues draft. But I do think it is important to kind of keep an eye out on the division, as a lot of these other
Yeah,
teams are
for
also
sure.
going through retools or even full scale rebuilds. Um, and I hate a lot of them. So I think we'll start where the draft kind of really started, with the Chicago Blackhawks. And I mentioned, it's good that the Blues are a well run franchise who clearly have a plan, not like the Chicago Blackhawks. Every day, every week, I am so thankful that I'm not a Blackhawks fan. Um, and I think this draft really exemplifies that. First of all, taking Demidov, or taking Levshinov over Demidov at 2, is something that I will never not let them live down. I think Levshinov will become a very good player um, in the NHL. But to me, as I said in the last episode, he's more of a product of his line mate. I don't know that Levshinov can ever be truly a number one guy. He's more like a, I don't know, maybe a Vince Dunn with less upside,
Hmm.
or maybe he can become a Vince Dunn. But even then, that isn't like this true game wrecking number one defenseman.
Yeah,
And that's who they took at second overall over Ivan Demidov, who has maybe the highest upside of this draft. I still really like Salayev, but some people say that Demidov could be the highest upside in this entire draft,
yeah,
because Celebrini's game is just so great at everything, but doesn't really excel at any one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Demidov, like if they had taken Demidov instead of Levchinov, to me, Bedard and Demidov could have been like Crosby and Malkin, and prime Crosby and
Yeah.
Malkin by themselves, basically, along with Matt Murray becoming God, won 2 back-to-back cups. And instead, they took a fine defensive prospect, but so I'll never let them live down that pick. I'm fully prepared to eat my words if I'm wrong, but I'm sorry. I think Demidov is such a good player, and not only that, he's like a Russian who sounds like he wants to come over to play in the United States, and there wouldn't be many problems with that. He spoke great English. Like all of the things were great around Demidov,
Yeah.
and they still went with Levchinov. I'm
Yeah.
sorry
It
if
seems
it's a
like
little loud, but
no, you're
I
good.
cannot. I'm so passionate about how excited I am that they messed up that pick.
You look at like, yeah, you look at like all of the the good teams. This is obviously like the peak example, but the Oilers have McDavid and Draisaitl. It's like it seems
Yep.
like a lot of these really good contending teams have like that 1-2 punch of
Yep.
their forwards, and
Formerly Stamkos and oh my gosh, I'm forgetting his name. Second place in the Hart this year.
oh,
Kucherov. That
Kucherov,
was
yeah.
embarrassing. Sorry, listeners.
Yeah, but like you look at these teams and they've all of the contenders have like those top two forwards. This was Chicago's chance to get that second one, and they fumbled it. I think they really did scout Levchinov a ton, which is probably they were just like, we just know this guy, but still pretty funny that they went with Levchinov.
That's something I'm going to be keeping my eye on, honestly, throughout their careers, because I love dumping on Chicago so much. And then real quick with the rest of they had not 1, not 2, but 3 first-round picks, which they had 2 and then traded up to get 27th overall. And I still think they messed up there, at least with 18th overall, their second first-round pick, Sasha Boisvert. I don't know. He was ranked a lot lower consensus than that, and he could be a fine prospect, but at the back end of the first round, 2 picks behind where we got Jiricek, who could be a very good prospect, admittedly lower floor. Boisvert is just kind of an unexciting prospect that I think there was still, like, Yzerman was still on the board, and they still need a good forward. And I really think Chicago really mishandled the top end talent of this draft. Again, I'll fully eat my words if it comes to it, but I'm very excited as a Blues fan to have that. Now, the other things I do want to, I will say with the rest of their draft, I actually think they did a pretty good job, but that's all I
we won't
need
talk
to
about
say.
that. We won't talk about that.
Forget about that. I do think the rest of the Central, though, is kind of the other part of why I wanted to talk about this. A lot of them didn't have many picks, and they still used those picks very well. So as we said, Minnesota got Ziboyem. That's really scary. And then they also got some other prospects I really liked, especially Kiviharu in the 4th round. Excuse me. So I think the Wild kind of nailed their draft for what they had, and the Predators, the other team, I can't stand the Wild and the Predators, man. They got Surin, another player I really liked. They sniped Teddy Stiga from us. Got a pretty decent goaltending prospect, and so I think they kind of nailed their draft for what they had. And it's frustrating because, especially, I have to give them their credit where I won't with Chicago. These are pretty well-run franchises. I think Minnesota's had a bit of a pretty bad stretch for the past 2 or 3 years in terms of their drafting and their moves, but I think they've turned it around. And Nashville's unfortunately always been good at that. So I guess what I'm trying to say for Blues fans is the Central is going to stay competitive for a while, and unfortunately, I don't think they're going away. Also, Winnipeg had very few picks, but I really like Alphonse Frey. That was their first pick, is the 2nd round. And then Utah had a huge draft, but not because of the players they drafted. Had some really big trades, acquiring Sergachev and the forward from New Jersey. But they are very much going to be competitive next year. I think we'll probably be gunning for one of the 3 playoff spots.
Yeah.
So Utah is kind of on the immediate horizon, and then brewing in the background is Nashville and Minnesota, at least for the time being, aren't messing up their retools. So
Yeah.
It's going to be competitive in the Central, which is exciting because you want to play against the best talent to prove you're the best team. But also, this retool for the Blues is really important as a franchise because it isn't going to be a cakewalk unless we play the Chicago Blackhawks.
One last dunk. Couldn't resist.
Couldn't resist.
Yeah, I think that it's super competitive, like with Dallas and Colorado also, right there. And then, I mean, you kind of love to see it from Utah, right? Like a new team in a new place. It's like
Yes
it's
and
hard
no.
to root against them,
The only thing
unless
for
you're
me is
like,
I feel so bad for Coyotes fans that
I
like
know, I
this is
know,
their window was just opening up, and
yeah,
then like I'm happy, yeah, for the new franchise. And honestly, like I could never hate the Coyotes. Joined the Central late, and
yeah.
they were just they were always the lovable losers. And now I'm happy for Utah, but if there are any Coyotes fans listening, I'm very sorry because that is just horrible what happened.
hmm So why don't we move on now to some trade talk? So the Blues had a couple of trades, like not blockbusters or anything, but some decent sized trades in the past few days here. So the first one that went down, I don't remember what day. Was this the morning of the first day of the draft
This
or the day
was
before? Either the 27th or the 28th, I think.
I want to say it was the 27th, but it might, I don't know.
Okay, so they had a trade with the Columbus Blue Jackets. They acquired Alexandre Texier from Columbus for the Blues 2025 fourth round draft pick. And then after the trade, they signed him to a 2-year, $2.1 million deal. He's a left shot center. He played 78 games last year with 12 goals and 30 points. Um, you you're pretty close to Columbus, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
have seen Texier play. You've seen the Blue Jackets play with Texier. So what do you think of acquiring this left shot center? Um, like where do you see him fitting in for the Blues?
Yeah, this is a good place to start, I think. Before we get to the next one, I have seen a lot of Blue Jackets games recently. Again, so happy I'm a Blues fan and not another franchise. And I've seen a lot of Texier. So Texier, let me start with the trade. I don't know that you can give it anything short of like an A, maybe an A plus. This was Columbus's second round pick in, I believe, 2021, maybe 2020. But he was a second round pick, and we traded him for a future fourth. First of all, if this were just straight up a second for a fourth, how did they get away with this? Second of all, for it to be an NHL ready player who's had a really good season in the NHL, how did they get away with this?
Yep.
I don't understand how Columbus ever agreed to this trade. But honestly, an Armstrong masterclass, if you ask me. Texier is a fan favorite. um, Texier is a fan favorite. There's a lot of 42s in the stands, so I'm sorry to them, but he's really young, so still developing. He's 24. This will be his third season in the NHL. He's kind of been up and down
Yeah.
uh, throughout. So 2021, 22, or sorry, 20. His first season was 2020. No, excuse me. Will be his fourth season. He's kind of been up and down. Uh, Starting in 2019-20, and then I'll go list them throughout the years. So 13 points in 36 games in the NHL for the Blue Jackets. The following year, 15 points in 49 games. The following year is his best year. He had 20 points in 36 games with 11 goals, 9 assists. And then last year, I had 30 points in 78 games. So finally got a full season. So Texier is someone who could play. Honestly, probably can't play. He's a bottom six forward, but can play anywhere on the line. Can play center or either wing. Is very good at it. Very, very, very good penalty killer is something that keeps getting brought up. And at worst, this is center or forward depth that can fill in for injuries, that can help just make our bottom lines better. He had a really productive season, both as a goal scorer in 2022-23, and then as more of an assist guy in 23-24 last season.
Mm-hmm.
So at worst, this is a very good bottom sixer who's a really good special teamer. And at best, he's 24. He could still be developing and, unlock a new level to his game, who is someone that I think was a solid prospect who showed a good offensive toolkit. I mean, this could be a home run, like for a 4th-round pick. I
Yeah.
can't get over how this trade happened. What is Columbus doing? What are they cooking? Because whatever it is, we are taking the benefit of it. So excited about this trade. This is a player I think Blues fans, if not fall in love with, they'll really, really like his game. Just I can't be happier about this move. A+ from me.
Man, you are coming in hot with the love for Doug Armstrong today, man.
I'll stand
Um,
by it.
I think it was a good move too. Yeah, like young guy, second round pick, like 1-for-1 with a fourth round pick is kind of
How?
it's
How?
wild. I don't know, man. I don't know, but maybe they know something we don't. I hope not, but yeah, looks to be pretty good. So you think
Sorry
he'll
if I'm
slot
running
in
a
on?
little hot today, but
I love it. I love it, man. I love the fire. Um, so you think he'll slot in on like third line, fourth line center, probably,
yeah, I think it'll probably be
or
hashed
wing?
out in training camps. I think they'll start him at center, but I think he could easily be moved to wing.
Yeah.
And I think he'll be good wherever they stick him. If he's a third line winger, if he's a third line center, fourth line winger. I think I think it's kind of hard to predict, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think it'll get uh hashed out in preseason. He'll probably play all of those positions, and they'll see who he plays best with, where he fits most. But
Yeah.
expect to see him at least on the second PK unit, if not the first. And
Yeah.
yeah, just really excited about this move.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say on that note is like the fact that they signed him then to that 2-year deal. I mean, that I know we've sort of brought it up a lot on our previous episodes. So that's just like perfectly in line with this retool. It's like they signed Drew Bannister to a 2-year deal. Steen's taking over in 2 years. It really seems like 2 years from now is like the end of the retool probably. So like he is young, and then and there is some growth that we would want to see from him. Only 30 points last year, which is solid. Don't get me wrong, that's solid
Yeah,
from a bottom six forward. But like maybe he'll show that growth, and then they sign him to another deal. And so I
yeah.
think that sets them up pretty well on that front.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
mean at 2.1 million per year,
yeah,
they got away with that price because of his age. Comparable to a player like Brandon Saad, who's making 4.5 million per year
hmm
for the next two, I believe. Last year he had 42 points. The year before he had 37. So this is essentially a younger, maybe a little bit less productive Brandon Saad for less than half the price. How can you not love this move? What?
yeah,
Yeah, I've said it enough, but
yeah. Great
in
move.
in support.
Yeah, totally agree. Now on to the one that's a little more spicy. It seems like from Blues fans is the Kevin Hayes
Mhm.
trade, and it's tough to like fully evaluate it now. And the reason for that is we'll just sort of get right into it. So the Blues traded Kevin Hayes and a 2025 second round draft pick to the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for future considerations. So whatever that means. So we'll find out exactly what they get back later on. But I will say they did not have to retain any salary. So I think Philadelphia is still paying
Yeah.
some of his salary, but the Blues will not have to. So they cleared some cap
Mhm.
space. And so what do you think this means for like their offseason plans? I think they're going to start tomorrow doing some contract negotiations, probably like an extension with Buchnevich is what it sounds like, um, and other free agency. So like, what do you think this signifies in terms of their offseason plans for this year, and then for the retool and going into next season and beyond?
Mhm. I wrote a piece on this trade actually recently. You can go check it out on Bleed and Blue, the fan-sided affiliate of the St. Louis Blues. Um, this is a really head-scratching move.
Hmm.
I don't think it's a bad move yet, but it is just kind of such a weird situation for so many reasons. Um, I mean, for it to happen during the draft, but to have it have zero ramifications on the draft itself is strange.
Yeah.
For Pittsburgh to be the team that acquires Kevin Hayes, an aging veteran forward who doesn't offer a ton, is stranger. And for the Blues to throw in a second round pick next year is really the crux of this deal.
Yeah.
A lot of people are calling it a salary dump. I'm not really sure that I can see that. Kevin Hayes only counted as just about 3.5, 3.6 million against the cap because Philly
Yeah.
was retaining a lot of his salary, which I believe was like 7.2 or 7.5. Again, what is that franchise doing paying Kevin Hayes that much money? But so a lot of that was still retained by Philly. So it was only about a little over 3.5 million against the cap, which isn't that much, and especially
Hmm.
because the cap is expected to go up a fair bit, not a ton, but a fair bit. Like this really isn't clearing that much cap space. So it is a very perplexing move. And the fact that they threw in a second round pick too is kind of to me the most intriguing thing, and I think they're getting something a lot more out of it.
I
Where
hope
my
so.
mind first went to was I think this could be a trade for Pittsburgh's first rounder next year. That seems a
Mm.
very steep price for Pittsburgh to pay. So perhaps the reason it's taking longer to get the return was because there's some conditional, like they want it lottery protected or record protected or something else, depending on how far they make in the playoffs. But Pittsburgh is very much in an all-in window right now.
Yeah.
They only have Crosby, Letang, and Malkin for however much longer they want to play hockey, which is not going to be that many more years. Honestly, I think Malkin and Letang probably have one or two more, and I think Crosby's probably got three more in him. So they're really trying to extend, and they're going to have a reckoning like none other when Crosby eventually retires. But no one can blame them for having arguably the face of the NHL and trying to go for it. Anyways, so them giving up a first rounder would make sense in that regard because they are trying to go for it. But this return does seem a little bit low to give up a first rounder. So that's why I think, yeah, as I said, it could be protected. If that's not the case, then maybe it is just for a prospect or maybe even an NHL player.
Hmm.
When I looking at their team, I think Marcus Pettersson probably makes the most sense. But again, it could just be a question of he does have it's either an 8 or 10 team no trade clause. So maybe they're working out with his agent and him to get that through. And he's 28 and this is his last year before he becomes a UFA. So it'd be a 1 year rental, but he's a very good defenseman, a two-way guy and solid offense and really, really good defense. As I mentioned, I've been to a lot of Blue Jackets games. A lot of time I go to Penguins Blue Jackets games because that is electric. If anyone can ever get to one of those, that environment is so crazy. Those teams hate each other and it is awesome. Um, but Pedersen always shines on the ice defensively. So if they're potentially getting some salary retention or just dealing with that no move no trade clause, I would love that deal. Alternatively, it could be for a prospect. The Penguins prospect pool is kind of weak right now. As I mentioned, they've been going all in, so they've been having to wheel and deal a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, so it would have to be more a question of when we get the announcement who I think it's going to be, or make a reaction then.
Hmm.
And the last option, maybe this really is just a salary dump, which is really interesting. I wouldn't love that because they threw in the second round pick, but maybe that was the price to retain none of Hayes' salary. But if that's the case, just retain the salary at that point because a second round pick is really valuable. That does
Hmm.
hamstring them on a lot of other trades that they maybe can or can't make now. So I'm really, really questioning what this could be. But yeah, so what does this mean if it is just a salary dump? A Buchnevich extension does seem likely, and maybe they are going with a more high AAV, low years extension if that's the case, if it is a salary dump, which I would
Yeah.
be in full support of. If
Yeah. I
it
would
is a
prefer that.
longer term, yeah, extension, as we mentioned, I just don't know that fits our window as much, to be honest, with
No,
how
not really.
Buchnevich is going to continue as a player. And otherwise, I mean, I don't think we're going to be in on, Stamkos. I mean, Gensel just got his rights traded to the Lightning.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, maybe this is to sign a guy who should make more money. Like, I don't know, maybe a Brady Shea, which I would like. I think it's really hard for me to grade this grade this trade. Draft, wow. Um, grade this trade at this point. Um, because it's hard to know what their cooking essentially, and
Right.
depending on what the return is, I could really like or really not like this deal. So we'll
Yeah.
see what it ends up being, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, we knew he would be on the trade block. It's like it's not a
Certainly,
surprising. It's not surprising that he was moved. It's just like
certainly.
the fact that they had a second round pick attached to it is what's a little more surprising. They got him from Philly for a sixth round pick in this year's draft. So if that tells you anything about the potential value that they could get back, and it's not that much salary like that
Right.
that they're moving. I don't I don't know why they would have to attach the second round pick unless it's something good, and I hope it's something good. Better be something good because it is a little bit of a head scratcher, as you said.
Yeah.
If Army wants Alec to keep holding his water, it better be something good. Um, cool. So
Couldn't get me Bueller and Dickinson. Get me a first.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Fucking
Um,
Jonah Jameson.
so we will revisit this when we know what exactly the Blues have get in return. But for now, a bit confusing, but we'll see how it all plays out.
Yeah.
Last thing we'll touch on before we close out here, real quick, is some adjustments to the coaching staff for the Blues. They hired Claude Julien as an assistant coach, and then promoted Steve Ott to like an associate coach position. Real quick, like, what do you think this means? What are your thoughts on the hires?
I think this is more Steen bringing in his guys. Steve Ott is someone who's been in the Blues organization a long time, was a player for the Blues back in the mid 2010s, so knows the system. And I've heard good things that the players really liked him,
Mm-hmm.
but that's kind of all I can say. And Claude
Yeah.
Julien was a coach around the league, so this is kind of them doing both, both bringing in one of their guys to help, spread the Blues way, as it were. And
Mm-hmm.
Claude Julien is someone who I believe was in the Canadiens organization, coaching for a while. So bringing in a different system so that you can surround
Yeah.
yourself with different voices and hopefully get the best out of those voices. Go forward with the best plan with what we've got.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't think a ton more about it. Other than I like it. I like that they're being proactive and getting their guys, and I hope it works out.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree. Adding that outside voice is always something that can be helpful. So that's pretty much it for us today. Like, just a lot of Blues news between the draft and the trades. And there's hopefully going to be a lot of Blues news in the next week or so. So tomorrow, July 1st, is, I believe, like the official start of the off season when it comes to like contract extensions and free agency stuff. So it's going to be an eventful week around the NHL in general, it sounds like. Um, we're not quite sure how eventful it'll be for the Blues, especially like right away, like as things get started tomorrow on July 1st. But whatever the case may be, if there is news, you can find us on Twitter and on Instagram at Note News Pod. You can find our episodes on YouTube at Note News Pod, as well as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you're on watching or listening on any of those platforms, if it's a podcasting platform, give us a review. We love to read those, and we really appreciate it. That helps us out a lot. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to our channel, check out our other content. We really appreciate that as well. If you ever want to, if you ever have any hockey questions, throw them in the comments, on all of our socials, and we'll definitely answer those. A little bit to expect from us moving forward. Alec, I think you're going to provide some coverage of this week, right? We won't have an episode covering anything that happens this week until probably next week sometime. But in the meantime, Alec is going to be providing you all with some coverage on our socials. So really stay tuned for that. If anything big happens, we're going to cover it. So you can find us on all our socials, as I said. So really appreciate that. Thanks for listening.
It'll be sort of
Yeah.
like an abridged episode, like a
Right.
short going over the player and the deal.
Yeah.
But not a
So,
full length podcast. So
if you just can't bear to go a full week without hearing Alec talk, then you can find those videos on YouTube. Probably is what you'll do, or you're going to post them on
yeah,
socials
I'll
as well.
post them on YouTube, and we'll get some shorts out on Instagram, YouTube
Nice.
as well, and then Twitter accordingly. So just check us out anywhere you already get our stuff.
Yeah.
We'll have coverage for anything that the Blues do within this exciting free agency period.
Yeah, and then the last thing I'll say, sort of on Blues coverage, Alec and I are now both contributors over at Bleed and Blue, as Alec mentioned earlier, the fan-sided Blues site. So we're really excited about that. We'll provide some other pieces on there. A lot of great writers on the Blues site as well. So really go check out that site if you want more Blues coverage. We really appreciate y'all tuning in today. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. And of course, let's go Blues.
Let's go Blues.